Okay, this is Debbie, and we are so excited for Creative Love Radio episode number 9. I hope you enjoyed this one. What is it about this week, Rob?
Today we're talking about learned optimism and love.
And we're also going to talk about learned helplessness. And are you a pessimist or are you an optimist when it comes to love? So stay tuned for this great episode. Welcome to Creative Love Radio with Debbie and Dr. Rob. We are redefining relationships to guide you to greater love, more success, and living your purpose through the latest research in neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Eastern wisdom. Get ready for another inspirational episode of Creative Love Radio. Hi, Rob. How are you today?
Very well, thank you.
I want to remind everyone before we begin to join us on Facebook in our group for this podcast called Creative Love Gurus. Just do a search on Facebook for Creative Love Gurus and ask to become a member of our exclusive group. Let us know what you think about the show, interact with us, and listen. We post all the episodes there. If you miss one, you have one there. And also be sure to leave us a review. Those really help us with our rankings and help us get more listeners. So if you like what you're hearing, we would really appreciate giving us a great review. No pressure. Write what you feel honestly, but we really hope to encourage others to join us in this great journey to love. Right, Rob?
Absolutely.
So what's the topic for today?
Today we're talking about some research by this guy named Martin Seligman. He is basically the prophet of positive psychology.
Okay.
And then positive psychology is really part of the whole social psychology research school. They look at social trends and the psychology of people involved in those trends, and definitely vary based on how do we learn as human beings, how do we apply what we learn. And so it's really useful to understand some of this research.
And it's useful for single people or people in relationships because it's social psychology. So we're going to teach a little bit of these concepts, and then how do you apply it in your life? And the big question is, when you come to relationships, are you like really optimistic?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you process what happens in a relationship, dating, meeting people? Or are you more of the pessimist or feeling like everything's out of your control? And so what we're going to talk about today is if you are a little pessimistic because life hasn't brought you the love that you want or the relationships aren't working out the way you want, how to change that and how to become more empowered in your search for love.
Right. The most useful concept that comes out of this whole research is called explanatory style. And that's just a fancy term for how do we explain what happens to us? Mm-hmm. You know, how do we account for it? If something great happens to us, what do we think about it? Where did it come from? How did we come to experience that? And if something terrible happens to us, how do we account for that? Mm-hmm. All right. That's called explanatory style. And what Seligman says is that the pessimistic person or the pessimistic view is very different from the optimistic view. They have very different explanatory styles. So we invite you to think about what is your explanatory style. When things happen to you, how do you explain them?
And so when we think about pessimism and optimism, there's this one, there's basically a spectrum of someone who's highly pessimistic, negative, critical about life or critical of themselves, versus someone who's over the top optimistic and someone who no one can take the wind out of their sails, so to speak. And so let's talk a little bit about the research around that. And there's a term that I'm sure many people have heard, and I've heard this before, is this idea of learned helplessness.
Absolutely. Right. So we all know about the
glass half full,
glass half full, or glass half empty scenario. And in our case, we think about it as a wine glass. Is your wine glass half full or half empty? So learned, the key word here being learned optimism or learned pessimism or learned helplessness, as you said. The whole idea is that this is the way we learn to observe the world. Now, a lot of it is unconscious, obviously. We do it automatically, so we're not going around saying, oh, I'm attributing these things to this kind of cause or this particular style. We simply do it out of our past learning and our past conditioning.
So we learn it from our families, how they approach life,
yes.
Like our parents, how they... And family members and our culture, right? How do you look at life? Do you look at it, everything's a possibility? Most of us grew up in a household that it was like drama or, kind of like feeling powerless in a way to the forces, that the life is just kind of difficult and you got to work really hard to make money. You got to find the right person and sometimes it's a struggle. And for me, I find when you talk about learned helplessness, I find that I was very optimistic, I think, when I first started looking for love and dating. And then after years of being alone and single for over a decade, of not having like a real lasting relationship, I started to feel a little helpless in that place of, is it ever going to happen? Am I ever going to meet anyone? And so I started really approaching dating in a helpless way. Like, I just feel like, is it ever going to work out? The shoe's going to fall when I meet someone. And I kept getting up and trying again, but it was like almost like I was optimistic and then I would get pessimistic right away.
Right. So,
and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. They're like, go online and they say, oh, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to find someone. And they go online and then there's no one they're attracted to, and they freak out and they stop right away. They shut down their account after like 2 days and they say, nope, it didn't work for me.
Right. And that has to do with how do we approach situations in our life that challenge us. Mm-hmm. So Seligman really started looking at some of the animal research, and they actually did experiments with dogs and cats and those kind of things. And they noticed that when animals face situations that it appears that they can't change the circumstances, mm-hmm. right? They give up, mm-hmm. essentially. That's learned helplessness. You give up, basically. Now, they translated that into human situations, and sure enough, they found people that had depression, for example. They're hopeless because they feel they can't change their circumstances. Mm-hmm. Their circumstances appear to be beyond their control. So for our purposes, for relationships and love, if we think, okay, where are we placing the locus of control? Meaning, where is the control? Is it within me? Do I have the power to change things? Or are things beyond my control? Are they coming from some external source that I can't change? We know, for example, for a pessimistic person, and by extension somebody that's maybe a little bit depressed or, kind of has given up on their circumstances. We've all met people like that. Or we've all been in situations where we felt that way. Yeah, we feel a little down or depressed or blue. The research showed that people that are chronically depressed, they'll tend to see good things in their life as accidental. That is, those good things just occurred to them because some external circumstance happened to be. It was a random, lucky event. So if they got a raise, it was probably just because I've been here for a while, and they would have given it to anybody that stuck around for long, for that amount of time. Now, on the contrary, when bad things happen to them, they attribute it to themselves. Yeah. They blame themselves. They say, you know what? I had it coming. Yeah.
I'm not good enough.
I have bad luck. I just didn't do the work. I didn't step up to the plate, et cetera, et cetera. Now, how does that translate to relationships and love? Well, if you think about, somebody great comes your way, you think, well, that's just an accident.
And then I'm going to screw this one up, right?
Yeah. And she or he probably won't like me.
Yeah.
Why?
What do they see in me?
Yeah.
Right?
So
they're
why
going to figure it out?
Why even try?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if they do get involved in a relationship and then it falls apart, they'll tend to blame themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
They lost this great opportunity, this great person. They screwed it up.
Yes.
Versus the other person screwed up by.
Yeah, or it wasn't a good fit.
Yeah.
Or, something like that.
Or I'm going to learn from this and move on.
Yes. The learned optimist is completely the reverse. When great things happen to them, they say, well, of course great thing happens.
Because I'm great.
Yeah, because I worked for it. And if they get a raise, it's like, yeah, I deserve this and I worked for it. And therefore people are noticing my efforts and my skill and my brilliance. So they're rewarding me, of course. Mm-hmm. When negative situations arise, they see them as, those things are, let's say, accidental. They're just temporary circumstances that arise.
A fluke, right?
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with me. I'll recover. I'll learn from it. Move on. Very different perspectives on similar events, right? One sees it, the pessimistic sees it as external locus of control, but if bad things happen, it's my fault. The optimist will see it as I created it. I'm worth it. And if something bad happens, well, it's just circumstances.
So the optimist thinks the bad things are external, and the pessimist thinks the bad things are internal.
That's right.
And it's reversed. Like they're kind of reversed. So we're not saying that one or the other is better or worse. I mean, the optimist probably has a little more resilience in life, where they keep going, where a pessimist would give up easily, would not take a lot of risks, where the optimist takes more risks. But there's also the extreme that if you are overly optimistic, like there's kind of like a good balance, but when you get to the other end of the spectrum, it can almost be that the overly optimistic person could be ignoring kind of the feedback that it's getting and almost in like pushing away any negativity. For some reason, I find that people that this is a great example of someone that says, oh, I don't really need to do any work on myself. I don't need to look within because, the relationship's going to just show up. That's just, it's there. That sounds really nice, but it's almost like they're pushing away learning or they're pushing away growth because they're being overly optimistic and they're feeling like, I don't need any help. I don't need any to look at myself and I'm perfect the way I am. And in a way, it's like I was talking Jungian psychology. If your personality is so much on one end, the unconscious is going to take on the opposite. So it's like almost like you're running away from that negativity or you can't think negative. And I really do think the positive thinking movement, although positive thinking is really great, to have, it's better to think positive than think, the negative and critical. But when it comes to the point where you're so afraid to be negative that you don't even want to look at it or look at that you can almost be in denial.
Right. And actually, Seligman talks a little bit about this, that both obviously have their pros and cons, and even learned helplessness or pessimism has its pros, in that people that are pessimistic tend to be a little bit more realistic, right? They're more cautious and therefore kind of more grounded in what's possible and what's real. The opposite end of pessimism is that people tend to be overly optimistic, that they may take risks when it's unwarranted or it's not advisable to take risks. but because they believe, well, things will just work out for me, right? But those are kind of extremes, all right? In both situations, going to the extreme kind of starts to hurt us, right? If we're overly pessimistic, we tend to go towards hopelessness. And hopelessness, we know, is very much associated with depression, with kind of loss of energy, losing that motivation to live and to thrive,
they're kind of giving up. And we see a lot of people do that. They just try to look for love. They're dating, or they have a bad divorce, and they kind of have that kind of hopelessness. They don't even want to try to go out again and find someone else. And
yes, and it's important to think about, where do these explanatory styles come from? Now, we know Seligman is saying it's learning, right? That we learn these things from our parents and from society and our peers, and et cetera. But we know there's also very powerful genetic and epigenetic forces at play. That we're born with a certain predisposition, a personality style, those kind of things. So those things play into our explanatory style. That is the way we see the world and the way we attribute things happening to us in the world. All combined then, right? The predisposition, and then the family learning, and then the school we go to, in our society, and the experiences we have, they kind of start to shape our explanatory style.
And so it's kind of like the assumptions that we make, and it's based on what you're saying is our worldview, how we see. And so you ask yourself, when you make up a story about why that person didn't call, or why you're not finding anyone that's attractive, or why your ex left, why you're single at 40 and you want to have kids, why this happened. You have to examine, what is my worldview? Do I believe that I create my life? Do I believe that I'm wounded in some way? Do I believe in the theory that something bad happened to me in my childhood, and I have to recover from that? And all these ideas are assumptions that mostly are unconscious, that we really just bring, and it shows up in the narrative. So it's so important. When you say explanatory style, I think about the narrative. What's the story I'm telling myself about this? A lot of people, and I used to think this too, is that you just change the story and your life will change. I'll look at this in a more positive way. But you're not changing the underlying worldview of why you believe that in the first place. So it's like kind of just rearranging the furniture. I'm going to just believe that love is possible. But if your underlying worldview is that you don't have any personal power, you can carry that for a little bit. But that's where that for me, I felt that I would be positive, but then my learned helplessness would take over again. That and we see this happen with people that we work with and with love all the time, is that they get really positive and then they have a setback, and then it takes them right back, and they're like, why is this happening? And it's because the worldview hasn't shifted. And so important. And not many people talk about that it's not limiting beliefs like I am good enough or I'm strong enough. It's that, what do I believe about the structure of the universe? Really, do I believe in God? Do I believe in a higher power? Do I believe in, where does love come from? All those questions.
All those things play into our explanatory style, no doubt. The question is, can we transform it? Can we change? Can we learn a new way of seeing things? And obviously the answer is yes.
We wouldn't tell you couldn't. You're stuck with that.
Right. Is it easy? Well, depends, right? Some of us are very entrenched in our explanatory style, and we don't want to listen to any alternative explanation. Some people are more open-minded. They say, well, maybe, tell me, maybe there's another way of seeing things.
So people that are more rigid in what they believe, and they're just not open to changing, are really have a hard time. And then the people that are open and saying, I want to learn more, and obviously what I believe is not fully working for me, I'm open to a new idea. That's really where you're going to be able to change your worldview. But your life, if you look at your life and look at how you explain it, or the why of your life is the way it is, that's your worldview. And if you keep that explanation intact, nothing you can do to think positive is going to change your outcome, because even if you meet someone and find someone, that explanatory style will continue, and that you'll be pessimistic in the relationship, or you'll be, or overly optimistic where you're ignoring the red flags. Those you're going to carry through, and it's going to impact you. So a lot of people ask, like, what does it take for lasting change? And it really is that worldview. So how do you do it, Rob?
Well, again, if we consider that the middle road is the best, right? We don't want to be too optimistic where we kind of we're fanciful and just believe everything is going to work out without us even trying.
Delusional, right?
Or we go to the opposite extreme where we're hopeless, right? And we just say, "What's the use?" and we give up. That's not very good, right? But if we kind of move towards the center and try to think as much as possible in that middle range of, yes, I have some control, and I have a lot of control actually on the things that happen to me, because it's arising from the way I explain things and the way the things that I attribute those things happening to me. Then I have some power, right? I'm seeing things in an empowered way, let's say. And when things get out of control, let's say when bad things happen to us,
good people,
when bad things happen to good people, we understand that they're not necessarily saying anything permanent about us. They're temporary situations that everyone experiences. Everyone has setbacks. Everybody has obstacles to overcome.
Life happens.
Exactly. So I think in general, certainly from this perspective of social learning, it would be that middle ground, cultivating that perspective of, let's try to be real and focused on what is possible, but also understanding that we do have a lot of control over our life, and a lot of it depends on our attitude, our perspective, our approach to life. So in relationships, obviously, it would be that if I don't like my past relationship patterns and histories, I can change it by learning a new way, a new perspective of seeing relationships. But I have to first observe what has been my explanatory style in the past.
It's the first step to understanding how you're thinking about life, right?
Absolutely. Like you said, what are the assumptions that are running unconsciously? What is that narrative saying about who am I and what's possible in my life as far as relationships?
Well, here's a really good example, real simple example. If you go online and you're dating and you're seeing no one you're attracted to, what are you making that mean? Are you making it mean that there's no men online and I'm too old? The people online aren't looking for someone my age. People are just looking for sex online. No one's serious about finding love. There's not enough men out there or women out there. All those things, right? And so then you have to question those assumptions. You have to question, like, well, what do I believe about the nature of reality, basically? What is my worldview about life that leads me to this conclusion? And what we often do is we don't question our thoughts. We don't question these assumptions, and we just assume it, and we live as if those are true. It's just like, here's another example. Think about before we discovered that the world was not flat. The whole worldview was that the world was flat, and you couldn't go out too far to the ocean because you're going to fall off, and there's these monsters out there that are going to swallow you up. Meanwhile, what happened is that ships went out there, and it was basically the ships weren't able to hold the sea, hold these little ships, and people would drown and they wouldn't come back. So they made this assumption. Well, they didn't come back because the world was flat. And when we realized Columbus or whoever discovered the new world, right? And there was this other world, and then they realized the world was round. Everything, the worldview of the whole society changed. So are you looking at love like the world is flat? You're looking at it from a limited perspective. And how do you change your belief system? Like, not from like these ideas of positive and negative thoughts, no, not limiting beliefs, but a whole philosophy of how you look at life. The world will shape and appear to you in your philosophy. So if you would think that love is hard to find, and you believe that there's, you're out here on your own, and God or a higher power isn't helping, you're going to have your narrative is going to reflect that. You're going to see that happen and how you respond to life. It isn't actually, and then you're not going to be able to even see a possibility. It won't even show up, love, because it doesn't fit into your worldview. And the same thing happens with when you think about everything in life. What do you believe? And so how do you change that, right? And Jung, they asked Jung one time, they asked if he believed in God. And he said, I don't believe, I know. And really it's coming down to where it's not just a belief, like, oh, I believe or I hope that there's this works. It's that knowing of who you are and what you stand for and what consciousness is and all these things that are the world you're experiencing. What is it all about? And that's those questions. To really become truly optimistic is understanding how the function of everything works so you can create with freedom and have like that secure, like kind of that sense of security. Like, I know that this is how life works. Yeah,
absolutely. And we know that our mind and our brain are very malleable. Mm-hmm. We can work with our mind, but we have to also include that in our explanatory style.
Yeah.
That we have to see that we're always developing. It used to be that we used to think about development only in children. Mm-hmm. Development ends basically at 21 or somewhere around there. But that's not really the case. We continue to develop and evolve continuously. And in essence, we have to take the reins of that evolution, of that evolving, mm-hmm. of that development ourselves in a conscious way and say, in what way do I want to develop today? Mm-hmm. Right? What's my next level of development? And I have to consciously direct it, because if I don't, it will go on automatic pilot basically and just kind of create from our past conditioning, our past learning, like we mm-hmm. see in explanatory styles, and give us very similar results. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing, first of all, is we're trying to understand how is it that we're learning, and what are the assumptions that I'm making from that learning, and then we can start to change them. Right, we're starting to instruct our own mind as to what is possible, what is real, where is the locus of control. Mm-hmm. Are things that are just random and happening out there, or do I have some say-so in that process?
And a lot of it comes from learning higher knowledge, really the higher knowledge, not learning like how the brain works or what hormones are triggered when you think certain things. It's really the higher knowledge is the nature of reality. Like, where are you learning your knowledge? Are you learning it from the Bible? Are you learning it from the Quran? Are you learning it from Vedanta or Buddhism? You have to have a solid philosophy. And if you notice that a lot of people say they're religious and they're really into their faith, but they don't act like they do. It's like it's words, but it's not in action. It's not in their belief. It's not really in their heart sometimes, because the fear and anxiety and the worry shows a lack of faith. It shows a lack of trust, a lack of that there's a higher power, that you're here by yourself, just like trying to survive and protect yourself, versus that there's a greater force in you that's working through you.
Right. Well, a lot of people describe themselves now as spiritual but not religious.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily kind of a religious understanding of life that we're getting, but more, let's say that we know we need to transcend kind of just a materialistic perspective on life. There's more to us than, just being a body.
Yeah.
If we're stuck in that biological perspective, life is very limited, right? It just appears to be very claustrophobic in a sense. We know imagination, dreams, mythology give us a glimpse into this deeper realm of the mind. And that's where spirituality comes in, right? It's not something external that we're learning from tradition and books, although those things are beautiful and wonderful. They contain the stories and mythologies and rituals and all that. But really, spirituality is coming from within us and kind of expressing itself through these desires that we have to know and to love and to transcend our ordinary existence, right? And love is the key
to transcending our ego and to really connect with a deeper spiritual part of ourselves. And I think a lot of the problem is, and I was in this problem for many years, is the spiritual bypassing and the trying to fit to so many different things into one belief system. Like, I was trying everything, and hearing there, and even now with the internet, there's so many different teachers teaching so many different things. And we tell a lot of our clients when they first start, they're getting mixed messages and they really don't know what to believe. And what the ego will do is pick the most convenient kind of path that causes the less pain. And so a lot of the think positive and motivational stuff is very appealing because it just kind of keeps you going, but it doesn't really make a change. And so that's the problem, is that there's so much out there that it can cause confusion. And you have to really just ask yourself the tough questions. What is it I really believe? And everything started to change when you really start to have that ground. And then we call it the philosophy of life. Your worldview is the foundation for everything. And then your beliefs and your thoughts and all those things and your actions and your emotions all arise from that. So we have to go down to the basics. And I love this class today, or this show today, because we're talking about optimism and pessimism, and how we relate to life shows us that worldview. And there's nothing more clear than just looking at how you respond to life, and then it tells you everything you need to know about what you believe about yourself and about the nature of reality.
Yes.
Deep stuff.
Yes. So again, we invite you to look at the way you attribute the things that happen to you, right? I mean, how do you see them coming into your life? Are they accidental? Are they the results of your own efforts? When good things happen to you, how do you respond to that? When setbacks happen, how do you think about those things? That understanding and looking at your explanatory style will start the ball rolling as to how do you transform that? How do you change it? How do you learn a new way of seeing things? And that gives you then the reins of that development in your next level of learning and of relationships. If you neglect that, you will simply recreate the same old patterns, right? That's when people feel stuck, because they're just replaying the same old pattern. They recognize it, right? I know this pattern. I've played it out many, many times before. So here's the opportunity to take the reins and change it.
So watch your narrative, watch that explanatory style, and just ask yourself those tough questions. And we'll see you on the next show. Until next time.
See you next time. Much love.
Take care. You've been listening to Creative Love Radio with Debbie and Dr. Rob. For more information, visit us on our website at creativelove.com.